Hi, I'm Mike Reynolds, a senior reporter covering the media industry with S&P Global Market Intelligence's Tech, Media, and Telecom News team. Welcome to Media Talk, a podcast hosted by S&P Global, where the news and research staff explore issues in the ever-evolving media landscape. Today, I'm joined by S&P Global Market Intelligence Kagan principal analyst Justin Nielson, who specializes in broadcast, among other things, Scott Robson, who tracks U.S. TV networks, and research analyst Michael Johnson, who's on the U.S. Sports Watch. We're going to talk about what is perhaps my favorite part of the sports calendar, March Madness, the big dances, if you will. How goes it, Scott? You ready for some madness?
Yes, this is one of my favorite times of the year. Really looking forward to some buzzer beaters.
All right. What about you, Mike? Dancing shoes on?
Oh, yeah. Great to be with you again, Mike. I'm ready to go.
And Justin, I know your Arizona State Sun Devils are not in the field, but the Big 12 is well represented otherwise.
Yes, thanks, Mike. Sad to say that ASU's men's basketball team didn't have the same success as the football team in their first year as part of the Big 12, but exciting to see how the conference fares overall with the conference champ and top seed Houston, my pick to win it all.
We're going to talk about both the men's and the women's tournaments, so a lot to cover. This is year 14th of the two media conglomerates teaming on the men's March Madness. CBS Sports now under the auspices of Paramount Global and what is now called TNT Sports, which is owned by Warner Bros. Discovery. A unique collaboration in terms of two big companies working hand in hand, so to speak, in terms of teaming on talent, production, promotion, scheduling, and ad sales aspects. Mike, your thoughts on the teammates assisting each other and some of the tournament's dollars and cents, if you will?
Yes, the CBS Sports TNT Sports partnership has been a part of March Madness for almost a decade and a half now, which is crazy to think about. And you can get a sense of the synergy between the two companies during their virtual media session last week. So CBS, they took over the entire package in 1991, but by 2010, I believe they were estimated to be losing around $50 million per year televising the tournament. And unless viewers had DirecTV or paid extra for I think it was called the Mega March Madness package, they were at the mercy of their local CBS affiliate over which games they were able to see. The tournament was outgrowing just one network, and thus led to the partnership between CBS and Turner in 2010. The original deal was 14 years, and it gave multimedia and streaming rights to both networks, as well as TNT Sports taking over the operation of the NCAA website and marketing rights to various NCAA championships. And in 2016, they signed an 8-year extension, which with the overall deal jumping to over $1 billion in average annual value beginning this year, actually.
Scott, this event has helped raise retransmission consent rates for CBS and licensing fees for TBS, TNT, and True TV. It's also been a boon from the ad sales site. It's $1 billion or more property that way.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, the network's raking about $1 billion in ad sales over the course of March Madness, which is increasingly valuable as the rest of the ad market for linear TV networks is challenged. It really speaks to the importance of live sports programming. And then aside from advertising, the license fees are also very important, especially when you look at Warner Brothers Discovery, which is going to lose the NBA at the end of this season. Right. Having marquee sporting events justifies a higher license fee from the pay TV operators. And when you look at a network like True TV, which has rebranded as a sports network, this is really an important property for them as they don't have a whole lot of standalone sports.
Gotcha. Justin, again, this tournament always is sold out, near sellout, pricing increases. Why does it work so well from an advertising perspective?
I think the attraction outside of just cheering for your alma mater or college team or player you follow is the drama of win and go home tourney, and anything can happen with a buzzer beater. Plus, you have to watch it live, and the engagement is very high across all the key demographics, which advertisers want, and is rare outside of a few other major sporting events, let's say the Olympics or Super Bowl. So I think advertisers are continuing to spend big money on the tournament, and the women's tournament ad spend has outpaced the men's the last few years with star power like Caitlin Clark and her run at Iowa.
Sure. This year, the Final Four and championship game are on CBS, so maybe there's a bit of a bump in audience there versus their cable counterparts. And I guess they alternate every year in terms of the most marquee games. But let's dig in a little more into the viewership. The UConn men won their second consecutive NCAA crown last year, beating Purdue pretty handily. Game average 14.8 million. The year before, UConn beat up on San Diego State. came through 14.7 million viewers on average. These are not numbers to sneeze at, but they're low as far as the tournament goes. I don't know, maybe people don't like Dan Hurley or Stores Connecticut. Still, this is something that performs very well overall for over the course of 3 weeks. Scott, can you give us a little bit more sense for what the audience was like last year?
Sure. So the games are a big draw for the networks. A lot of the games are averaging over 10 million viewers. I think the average across all games was just under 10 million last year and was up 3% from the previous year. Now, last year's Elite Eight matchups were the highest in 5 years. There was a game between North Carolina State and Duke that drew over 15 million viewers. So it's very matchup dependent. I think this year is prime for some big matchups. And I think that the title game could break the slump that you mentioned, especially if Duke makes the final. And then also the game is starting half hour earlier at 8:50 p.m. Eastern, which should help.
Yeah, I think that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, that East Coast versus West Coast in a different sense. Anyway, multi-platform for the tournament also plays a big role. Mike, there's a lot of streaming in play here.
Yeah, absolutely. What's made the tournament great for many years now, people have had the ability to stream the games from pretty much anywhere, whether it be home, work, at the bar, wherever you're at. Along with the four major television networks, TBS, CBS, TNT, True TV, fans can also stream games on the traditional NCAA March Madness Live platform, with additional streaming on Max for games that are broadcast on TBS, TNT, and True TV. And then for those games on CBS, live streaming's accessible through Paramount Plus as well.
Yeah, they give you a lot of different ways. And if they saw me do this, they know I'd be cheating. But I guess the boss buzzer is still in play. You're watching the games at your desk and your boss pops into the area and you hit a button and all of a sudden you got a spreadsheet in front of you. I don't really know how much that works. I'm not a spreadsheet guy. So Sarah would know that I would not be doing that. Scott, as Justin alluded to a little bit before, there's alumni, different interests. Again, why do you think this event really plays so well over the 3 weeks?
Yeah, I think people enjoy filling out the brackets and the social appeal that has with so many games. The potential for a dramatic finish is high, which is exciting. I think the one and done format is also more appealing to the casual sports fan than sitting through a 7-game series. I think the broad appeal it's really also amplified by so many regions of the country having a horse in the race.
Mike, there's other appeals, maybe a few dollars and cents going along.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago, the American Gaming Association reported that a record 68 million Americans placed bets in some form on March Madness in 2023. Of these 68 million, 31 million engaged in traditional bets through traditional sports books, with another 20 million just engaging in bets with casual friends, things along those lines. And then in 2024, last year, it was reported U.S. bettors legally wagered a total $2.7 billion on the men's and women's tournaments combined over the course of the tournaments. And that's more than just about double what this February Super Bowl between the Chiefs and Eagles raked in.
It's interesting, though, Scott, because sports betting is legalized in 38, 39 states and in D.C. When it comes to watching these games, they're sportsbook free, right?
Yeah, so while these games will be bet on heavily, the gambling companies won't be able to run ads during the tournament. So that's still a bit of a gray area. And then there's also laws in place where you can't bet on local college teams in certain states.
And then there's brackets, including one helmed by yours truly's alter ego, aka Mikey Brackets. Mike, you have some interesting stuff in terms of bracket numbers.
Yeah, so each year there are around 100 million brackets filled out for March Madness. And I think technically if you were to flip a coin for each game, the odds for a perfect bracket are something like 1 in, I think it's 9 quintillion for the tournament.
All right.
Those odds, yeah, if you were to use like strategic logic, picking favorites over underdogs, that drops to about 1 in 120 billion for odds. Still long shot, but the closest attempt at a perfect bracket was in 2019 when I think a bracket went 49 games before their first loss. So technically there's a chance, but probably not in our lifetime.
That's even at 49 games. It's a 67-game event.
Exactly. Long way to go from there.
All right. Justin, what do you make of St. John's? It's a number 2 seed under Rick Pitino. The club has had a great year. St. John's hasn't won the Big East tournament since 2000. Does having a strong New York metro area team with a chance to maybe go a little bit of distance make a difference for viewership?
I think it will. The return of Coach Pitino to the national stage at St. John's after multiple national championship years at Kentucky and Louisville, and a bad exit from Louisville, and then stints
Sure.
in the NBA with the Knicks and Celtics. It's a new college sports landscape with the NIL. It's good to see St. John's prominence from all those runs in the 80s and 90s. I remember filling out brackets with St. John's back then. So I think having somebody return to power, I guess you would say, what we saw with UConn over the last few years, I think it's great for the sport.
Cool. We'll see how they do. Guys, we discussed this somewhat last year. There was talk about expanding the field from 68 to 76, or maybe even 96 teams. The rattle this year seems to be towards 76. During the virtual March Madness Media Day that Mike alluded to earlier, Warner Brothers Discovery's head of sports, Louis Silverwasser, and CBS's Dave Burson said they've engaged with the NCAA about possible expansion. At the same time, a little reticent. They talked about the event's integrity and that it works well now. Scott, your thoughts here? Are we at the right number?
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be a sports fan in the US as there are new high profile sporting events just being created. We saw this with the expanded football playoff, the NHL's Four Nations tournament, the NCAA and Fox are debuting a new college basketball tournament this year called the College Basketball Crown. So there's really no shortage of events. I think with March Madness, we already have all the conference tournaments leading up to the big dance. So I think the field of 68 is enough. You don't want to water it down to the point where the first few rounds seem meaningless or filled with blowouts. Now, that being said, I think if you were a fan of West Virginia or any other team that got snubbed by the committee this year, you'd probably be lobbying for a 96 team field.
Okay. Justin, do you agree?
I agree. They already expanded to 68 with the first 4 play-in games. I think that's a great number. If you were to expand to 76 or 96, what does that mean for the conference tourneys, right? That would be less important in terms of the automatic bid. So I like it where it is.
And Mike, last word to you on the subject here.
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. I'm sure it'll just come down to the economics and the scheduling between the NCAA and the partners. But there's been reports that it could just further stress the schedule even more now that it's perfectly spread across 3 weekends in March and April. So I'm sure there'll still be a debate on the final 4 teams, no matter how far they expand. But who knows? They might expand it even more, and we could see all 16 SEC teams in the field.
Right. There you go. Only 14 made it, a record. 3 more than the Big East when they had 11 in 2011. I guess the expansion, if they were to go in that direction, would also go over to the ladies' side, and we're going to talk about that side of the bracket. Scott, there's some new financials in play for the women's tournament as well this year?
Yeah, so ESPN is paying $920 million to broadcast 40 college championships over 8 years, which includes the women's tournament. The women's tournament is valued at around $65 million per year. Huge step up from the previous deal. The women's teams will be paid for playing in the tournament this year. I think it's $15 million that will be spread out, and that will grow to $25 million by 2028. Good news there for the women's side.
Justin, you mentioned Caitlin Clark before. She's now with the Indiana Fever in the WNBA. Last year, record-setting viewership on a number of occasions. There was also big-time players in LSU's Angel Reese, Stanford's Cameron Brink, and Camila Cardoso from the undefeated South Carolina team. Is there a sense you have this year's tournament maybe tough to live up to that?
Possibly. There's still some star power this year with Paige Buckets Buchers at UConn, just signed a major NIL deal. Hannah Hidalgo at Notre Dame, and Juju Watkins at South Carolina. So I think it'll be interesting because who knows, does South Carolina defend its crown? But I think UConn, Texas, UCLA may have a chance here. So maybe a little bit more parity. But yeah, I think there's still star power.
I think, going forward, and, maybe this is her showcase, and if not, she's got a couple of more years to go. Juju Watkins from USC, she's ahead of where Caitlin is in terms of if she continues on her pace, she's going to unseat Caitlin 3 years later as the all-time scorer. So there's some storylines there. I was talking to Disney ad sales executive Jacqueline DeBise last week, and she told me the women's tournament is 95% sold out. They've held some inventory back for last-minute opportunities. The championship game has been sold out for months. Pricing is up. There's a lot more new advertisers. There's new categories. Mike, what does this say about the tournament specifically and women's sports in general?
Yeah, so this is just further showcasing the power of women's sports and the growth that has taken place over the last few years, women's sports is producing viewership numbers that haven't really been seen, and that's resulted in record-setting advertising figures. I think last year it was reported that a 30-second ad unit for the tournament's final game, the championship game, it cost around $500,000. And you're also seeing advertisers increase budgets to take advantage of this increase in interest in women's sports and the women's tournament in general.
Yeah, it's something that's definitely been going on. Disney's been at the forefront of the women's games, and I think some of the other media players have been trying to catch up as well. We've gone through some of the teams here and some of the players. I guess the question will come down to if it falls way short of last year. Does that kind of stop women's sports momentum? I'll ask all three of you guys that. Scott, what do you think?
I think it's going to be hard to live up to last year's tournament from a viewership standpoint. While the audiences might decline a bit year over year, I think they still should be pretty strong. I think a lot of the people that tuned in to see Caitlin Clark last year will return this year. I'd be surprised, though, if the women's final outpaces the men again this year. Still, though, 95% sold out. I think there's a lot of advertising interest. And so I think it will still do pretty well.
Justin, your thoughts here?
I would have to agree with Scott. I think it'll do very well. I don't think it will hit the numbers and outpace the men's like it did last year.
And Mike, that's okay. There's always high water marks, but your sense here.
Yeah, I agree with the guys. You might see the slight pullback in viewership numbers, but you'll see the lasting impacts of last year's viewership totals continue to grow at the women's collegiate game, especially with star players like, Hannah Hidalgo for Notre Dame, who's only a sophomore, but continuing to transcend the sport.
Get into the end here, fellas. And for those of you who may want some help with your brackets, this is clearly the most important part of this Media Talk installment. Selection Sunday's behind us. Who do we got making the Final Four? We're going to go with the women first. Mike, who's your ladies' Final Four?
Yeah, so I'm going to go with UConn, Notre Dame, South Carolina, and UCLA in the Final Four. And then I'm going to go with South Carolina to win it all again over UCLA.
All right. Scott, you want to share your brackets?
Yeah, so I don't follow women's basketball very closely, but I like Texas's odds this year as a 1 seed. I think USC might be the team to beat, and wouldn't be surprised to see LSU and South Carolina also make the Final Four.
Maybe Scott, for everybody, he lives in Austin, so there may be a little home talking. Anyway, Justin, who's your 4?
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I've got South Carolina and UConn in the final, but you look at UCLA, USC, and Texas, like it's going to be a tough championship and to make it to the Final Four. So I'm expecting a lot of upsets, to be honest.
All right. Me, I'm going to go for South Carolina, Notre Dame, LSU, and USC. I don't know. My kid went to LSU, so there's some sentiment there, but I think it'd be great for the game if maybe USC won. We'll see. How about on the men's side? Scott, can you go first this time?
Yeah, I think this year there are going to be a lot of top seeds advancing to the Final Four. I think Florida is the team to beat right now after steamrolling the SEC. I like Texas A&M, Florida, Duke, and Tennessee in the Final Four.
All right, Mike, who you got?
Yeah, I'm going to go pretty chalk as well. I got Florida, Auburn, Duke, and Tennessee, with Florida beating Duke in the final.
All right. I'm going to say Michigan State, Duke, Houston, and I'm going for the local guy in St. John's over Florida. Justin, you're last here. Who you got?
Like I said, I have Houston winning it all. Duke without Cooper Flagg, he's suffering from that ankle injury. I would have picked Duke. And for the other brackets, Florida. Yeah, Florida and maybe St. John's. I don't know. I'm waffling.
Florida's
a bit,
tough.
but
Florida's tough.
I'm waffling a bit. But yeah, I think the SEC is going to be well represented in the final.
All right. There you have it, everybody. A little bracket advice from a group of absolute experts. Follow our leads to bracket heaven, or take the George Costanza approach and go totally opposite as much as you can. That concludes this edition of Media Talk. I wanted to thank Mike, or MJ as he's called here, Scott, and Justin for musing about March Madness with me. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
This is Mike Reynolds. Until next time on Media Talk, enjoy the madness, and we'll catch up again soon.